afternoon. Hopefully you're in the right theatre, squeezing the most from your fast data infrastructure. A little bit about me. So who am I? Stuart Mould, product owner at Conductor. My background's mainly been working in data products for large engineering organizations, but more recently I've been spending more of my time working on Kafka proxies. So before I start to set the scene with some context. Here I've presented a typical data maturity journey. The blue line is that theoretical, the more time you invest, the more value you get out of it. We'll move through some of those progressive stages, which I'll talk about in a moment. But the purple line is more like reality. Like things aren't always that simple. Experts come in, can either disrupt things or kind of give you a bit of a reality check. So how do we kind of move along this curve, and what do each of those stages like? The first stage is the ad hoc stage. There's maybe a few data sources going on. Things break. When they do, you fix them. If you need more sources, you add them. And the focus here is on collecting all that data and storing it. The challenges come to do with data quality, a bit of standardization, and silos cropping up everywhere. The next stage is about awareness. Here, maybe the exec or the management team have come to you for some messaging. They tell you they want to be data-driven, but reality, they're maybe being data-informed. Budget may start to appear. This might look like prioritization weightings, or maybe even some actual money on the table. Documentation may finally come into being as well. And the focus here is on reporting and sharing the data, as well as collaborating with others. The challenges you'll be facing are really about culture change. Why now? Why is this important? Why do we have to do this data thing anyway? Penultimate stage on my diagram there is the analytical stage. Here you may actually get dedicated hires or dedicated teams, and transformations start appearing in. It's not just simply moving data from A to B. Someone may dare to say the phrase data science, and clear ownership and growing responsibility appears around each of your data sources. Focus here is on data strategy, influencing KPIs, perhaps objectives and key results. You're getting more involved there, and data-driven decisions are actually starting to appear. Challenges are about data security. Who's allowed to access this data? Why? Perhaps some governance in place. It's quite easy to make a mess of these things, and quality requirements really come into being. Costs will also start to grow. And the last stage, the dream, the data-centric organization. Data is the core of the company. Everything you're doing is built around data. The data mesh best practices and principles are coming into being. You may start bringing in other people to help you get there. Data is seen as a strategic asset for the business, and the use cases start to become more complicated, predictive and prescriptive use cases. You'll be focusing on modeling and monetization of the data, but challenges will look like ethical and regulatory considerations, as well as cost optimization challenges. So, which one were you? Have a think here. Where were you looking at on this data journey, and where would you like to be? The talk today is going to focus more on the right-hand side of this curve. However, if you were more towards the beginning, you're about to hit a lot of the problems I'm going to talk about today. So what are the growing pains as you advance along this curve? Three I'm going to talk about today is the explosion of resources, how that diverts your attention away from your core business activities, and the talent pool problem. Firstly, what is the streaming talent problem? Streaming data is hard. It's not something that's easy and we can just get going with it. There's an initial learning curve can be really challenging for some. And there's so many new concepts to learn. I don't know how many you can spot from here, but these I've all had to pick up over the last few years. And you might even be faced with dealing with the challenge of inheriting a really bad architecture, and you just got to deal with it. Hiring is also not easy. There's not enough good talent out there, and there's no substitute for experience. Job openings are always going up, and new tech exists every week that we have to review. And knowledge retention. Reality is people will leave. People, and you might be faced with the team you've got, don't quite know enough without bringing someone in. And even if you bother to train them, they could still leave. The resource explosion. So as you grow, more. You have more runs to do, more tables to create, more data to store, more streams to set up, and more sharing to do. And none of these are immediately obvious for just switching off. Otherwise, you probably would have done so. Managed services are really tempting. They're a great tool to help you with. They're brilliant, to be honest, but they're possibly expensive. And as they get rolling and things start to go in, the price curve really ticks up. So a frequent tool we see our customers reaching for as well is data replication. So performing analysis and sharing across teams, rather than you just using your main first cluster there, you may end up spinning off to an alternate data source to bring up with that as well. But here there's a lot of challenges, like permissions, authorization, maintenance, and unclear ownership is key. As you're growing like this, it's going to divide your team's attention. They're not just spending time on those core business activities or what they're meant to be doing. It's all the other stuff you've got to deal with. And operational overhead. Those deployments end up becoming tougher. They're failing more often. No one quite knows why on some things. You're having to wait longer, make a fix, retry, do it all again. And this ends up becoming easier to break. This will really slow you down and reduce your innovation efforts. Like, how often can you create time in your sprints for trying something new or doing a spike? That becomes more tough as you're speaking to more people across the business and more teams are interested in what you're doing. So none of this sounds very easy. How might we tackle some of these problems? So what we've seen working for some of our customers, and in my experience, is simplification, virtualizing at scale, and then scaling your governance along with this. The first one, simplification for scaling. As I talked about earlier, data replication is that tool people will frequently reach for. It's an easy one to get you going, to tick the box, to complete the tasks, and move forward. However, this can lead to unlimited bloat. How might we simplify and curb this cost explosion? The first one I want to talk about is sharing data with third parties. How many of you are struggling with sharing data with your third parties? Is that an issue you've had to deal with? External data sources, linking them into your cluster? It's something we've seen challenge a lot of our customers. So at the moment, that replication cluster there I've highlighted is often the solution they're going to reach for. Each one of those third parties you're going to be plugging in. You're going to have to find a new way to do it. There's no way you're allowed to plug straight into your core Kafka cluster. That's just not going to cut the mustard. So replicating data out like this is what people will reach for. That's really a problem because now you've got to do all the stuff you were doing on the main cluster. Again, yes, it might be smaller, but you've still got to deal with all these new consequences. The solution is creating a secured, shared, safe space to interface those third parties into. You're able to get rid of that replication cluster immediately and create this virtual layer between your core resource and what you need to share with the third parties. Also, this virtual layer is going to look like a proxy, a Kafka proxy. So the third parties here can all interface in the same way. It's very scalable for you to add more as you go. You don't have those unique interfaces for each one going along. Another place we've seen for standardizing across the organization is reducing interface variations. So for each of these clients, different teams have different requirements and how they want to build their tools. You don't want to go messing in there and trying to impose extra requirements of them. They may need Java for this, Python for that. This grows into many clients within the ecosystem. That's to be expected, and that's fine. Plugging them all into Kafka, they've all got their own ways. However, when they need to connect to an additional source, more than just the Kafka broker, such as a KMS, such as a claim check pattern solution, then you can end up with an integration for each one of those clients. That's something you've got to maintain. That's something that could change, and it will be different for each of those languages. You may find some smart ways to simplify. That's good. That's fine. But then the versions might change as well. And what we've seen with some of our customers is just this becomes unmanageable and a complete mess. So the answer, what's common across all of these clients here? Kafka. Having that wrapper around as a Kafka proxy allows all of the clients to just connect to them with Kafka as they're meaning to, and then connecting your KMS or your external system, again, into the proxy with Kafka. Simplifying the number of interfaces you need to maintain. It doesn't become this huge support matrix. It's just that to the proxy. I've talked about how we can simplify some of those things down, and that's trimmed down the amount we have to deal with. But how might we now virtualize what we've got left? We want to squeeze more out as we're looking to scale. Historically, VMware allowed us to virtualize machines, and that brought us where we are now today with cloud computing. But you don't own the machines anymore. The cloud providers do. So how might we virtualize our managed services and squeeze more out of them? The first option is squeezing more ROI out of your service providers. Like putting a virtual layer in the way means you're not just tied into one vendor. Perhaps you want to explore multiple Kafka cluster providers at the same time. Perhaps you've got different use cases for each of those. By putting a virtual layer in between, you bring yourself back to flexibility rather than being locked in. It also allows you to play around with migrations, like how you might move data between different clusters or from different providers without disrupting those applications. If you don't have a virtual layer in between that you get to play around with, then you're a bit stuck. All those teams are going to be disrupted. It's going to be a bit harder to push that along as a bit of a business case. Virtualizing at scale to squeeze more out of those clusters as well. So rather than just providing from different providers, we're able to create new spaces for each of those teams. Perhaps you've got a project. Perhaps you've got a department that need their own cluster. Rather than spinning up physical resources for all of those, perhaps you could spin up virtual resources for those. You leave the Kafka clusters in the back end as the main workhorse for what you're doing, but virtualization on the front allows you to explore a few more options there. And ultimately, you get to increase your utilization instead of increasing your bill. So I hope a few of you are familiar with the idea of Docker or containerization. If you're not, put simply, it allows you to bring applications running in different environments in the same way. With Kubernetes, that allowed us to scale this out and run more and not just focus on the single container and squeeze more out of our bare metal behind the scenes. But now, how might you look about squeezing more out of your topics rather than just the bare metal machines themselves? Virtual topics allow you to layer more and more on top of what you're doing. So how might you bring that virtualization? We suggest a proxy. And then virtual topics, why not go a step further? Virtualizing the whole clusters as well, and then you can create this nice virtual setup to squeeze the most out of your physical Kafka clusters and your physical topics behind the scenes. So we've simplified to trim down what we're dealing with, and then we've looked at virtualization options to squeeze even more out of what remains. But as we've packed more in, and there's more going on, we need to guard that. There's a higher population going on, and if something goes down, there's going to be more of an impact. So how might we guard those now packed resources? The first option is for scaling for control. So teams may create resources not following the naming convention they're meant to be using. They might not bother. They might not know. Different teams behave differently. That's fine. That's to be expected. Or they may spin up resources for tests they're doing and not bother to tear them down. By introducing this proxy layer in between, it allows you to introduce business rules that you can control and you can configure. So you may be able to create topics, but stop people from creating huge topics. And that may prevent inexperience in teams that maybe don't work with Kafka so much, and they need something to bolster them. It also allows you to bring the experience and the best practice of your teams that do know about that by setting those guardrails. You can create topics with 8 partitions, but you're not allowed to create topics with 100 partitions. That's up to you guys, and it gives you the power back to do that. It also allows you to check for data quality issues, which may be a thing you're struggling to deal with. And what we've seen with that is schema validation. Our teams bothering to use schemas at all, why not intercept the message on the way to the cluster and reject it? Make sure they're using schemas. Make sure they're using the right schemas. But putting that all in place can slow things down. You don't want to be approving all the different tickets required for each of those things. You want teams to be able to self-serve within the limits they need to. What we've seen with some customers is they're managing up to 20 projects. They're constantly hit with ticket requests to approve new resource creation, and sometimes they just don't know what those are. And it's going to take too long to find out, and they may be struggling to balance that workload alongside everything else that they're up to. So enabling your teams with those guardrails that allow certain things to happen, but other things not to happen, really gives yourself back the power. And what we've also seen is people may already have an existing portal that's going on to allow you to do this. That's fine. Perhaps you don't want to invest more time going into that, and instead want to do it yourself. And lastly, working out who's pushing the limits here. So as your data is flowing through, is someone a bit of an outlier in terms of consuming too much, producing too much, more than expected? Working out who they are, auditing them, and identifying who's doing what in your system allows you to have that conversation. Why are you doing this? What's taking up all these extra resources? Do you really need it? If so, let's trim that down and work from there. You may also be looking to implement chargeback across your organization. If people and different teams are using different amounts of resources, being able to audit them allows you to implement that chargeback model more successfully. So today, we've gone through a bit of a data maturity journey, explained each of those stages, and how we can optimize for different parts of that, primarily focusing on the growing stage and how we can simplify, virtualize, and then govern from there. TLDR, introduce logical layers. There's different tech out there for different resources, but for Kafka, that's something we're doing at Conductor. Thanks very much for your time. We're down at booth 204, but I've also got a couple of minutes for Q&A if there's any questions.